Hey everyone, Hfmasters here, and today we're taking a little break here from the usual list or basically videos to ask a question. Today I'm going to be looking at which ninja has appeared in the most sets across all of Ninjago. Now the way I've gone about finding this is that I've decided to only include the actual sets in the total count, meaning I'm not including poly bags or like these weird foil packs or books or boxes or whatever. I'm not counting those because those aren't available in all regions like your typical set would be, so they aren't always accessible to your average person or average fan, so I don't want to be including those in the actual counts because of that. Alright, let's get started. So the least common minifigure, as I'm sure most of you are expecting, is Nia. Now this makes sense since Nia has been a ninja for about 5 seasons less than everyone else, so it makes sense that she wouldn't have been included in as many sets in the earlier years of Ninjago. However, ever since she has officially become a ninja, she has been included in much more sets. She was tied for the most common figure with Kai for Hands of Time, coming in 2 sets. She was also tied with Jay, Cole, and Zane for coming in the most sets in Day of the Departed, and she was tied in Skybound with Kai, Lloyd, and Cole at 3. So you can already see they've been ramping up the amount of minifigures that Nia has been getting in each wave. However, as it stands right now, she's the least common. Next up is Cole, which to me isn't that shocking considering Cole hasn't really had his own real season, and the one wave which you would say was his season was not even a full wave dedicated towards that storyline. It was split between 2 different seasons, being Day of the Departed and Skybound. So it does make sense that Cole would be towards the bottom here. Now Cole has actually been the most common in a couple seasons. He was the most common in Day of the Departed, which obviously makes sense, and he was the most common in Skybound in that 4-way tie. He also was one of the more common ones in Rise of the Snakes, tied with Jay, but aside from that he hasn't really been all that common. Now this one is very surprising to me, but Lloyd is actually one of the least common figures. Now I get that, you know, for the first year Lloyd just straight up didn't exist, but the way it is right now with the prominence that Lloyd has just starting from the Ninjago movie and he's going up until now, I was really expecting to see a giant increase right around there in his figure count. But as it turns out, in the grand scheme of things, he isn't that common, and it does kind of make sense when you look at it. Lloyd has been the most common figure in a lot of seasons, but he hasn't been that high of a count. He was the most common in the final battle with a whopping 2 minifigures. He was the most common in Sons of Garmadon with a whopping 3. He was in a tie for the most common in Skybound with 3. And he was the most common in the Ninjago movie with an actual really high number with 9. However, other than that, he's been really low for the most part and has really only appeared in 1 or 2 sets in most ways, while other ninja would be included in maybe 3. So when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, he really isn't that common, even though right now he is very prominent. Zane is right around where I was expecting him to be, right somewhere in the middle. Although it is worth noting that he does seem to be following a similar path as Nia, whereas in the beginning season he wasn't really that common. He was just kind of one of the more middle figures. He was kind of like at the 2 or 3 margin, but now getting into these more recent seasons he's gotten a lot more common. He was the most common figure in Hunted, Day of the Departed, and Rebooted, and he hasn't really been all that common in any other waves. Isn't really much to say here. He's pretty much just right where I was expecting him to be. Now Jay was one that was pretty surprising to me. He's actually the 2nd most common figure, which is not what I thought was going to happen at all. I figured Jay would be one of the more middle ones, and I figured Lloyd would be up here at number 2. But as it turns out, Jay is actually very common. He was the most common in Day of the Departed, obviously tied with Cole, Nia, and Zane. He was the most common in Skybound, tied with Kai, Nia, Cole, and Lloyd. He was the most common in Rise of the Snakes, tied at Cole with 5. He was the most common in Hunted, tied with Kai and Zane, and he was the most common figure in Possession with a whole 6 figures, which is not what I expected at all. I never realized until now how common Jay was in Possession, but yeah, he was very easy to get. It is kind of interesting with Jay though, because although Jay is really common, he does kind of seem to follow this every other wave thing, where in one wave he'll just be in like a couple sets, and then the next wave he'll be in like all of them. It's weird, he just keeps kind of alternating. But I guess it doesn't make sense given that he is one of the more popular characters out of all of them. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on. So like I was expecting, Kai is the most common figure, and he's the most common by a pretty fair margin. This for me was an easy choice because Kai has just always been a super easy one to get. I mean, to put into this perspective, in the LEGO Ninjago movie wave, he came in 8 sets and he was completely irrelevant in that movie. He pretty much did nothing. Put that perspective here, that's 1 set more than Lloyd, and the 1 set that's separating them is a Hfmasters set. If this was like any other wave, then Kai would have been tied with Lloyd to have the most amount of figures in a movie that he was pretty much completely irrelevant in. Kai is also the most common figure, or tied to be the most common figure in easily the most amount of waves out of anyone, being the most common in the pilot season, both waves 1 and 2. He was the most common figure in Legacy, Tournament of Elements, Hands of Time, Skybound, and Hunted, which is just crazy. He's just so common and so easy to get, which of course does make sense. You know, you always look at Ninjago, and Kai's pretty much always been one of the more prominent and focused on characters in the shows, so it makes sense that it would be a pretty easy guy to get from one of these sets. But that is it for this video. I just thought this would be something kind of interesting to look at. Let me know what you guys think, but until next time, see you guys later.